Do I have a treat for you? I have a recruiter who has over 20 years of experience, and we're going to talk about the processes in selection and recruitment on a financial position and how Karen goes from sort of the beginning process to the very end process. A wealth of information here, and I'm very excited for our next guest. Karen, thank you so much for joining us. I first met you probably, about 20 years ago, 22 years ago, where you came over for dinner because my father was so thankful that you were able to land him a position in IT. And at that point, I had no idea what recruiting was. I had no idea what HR was. And I thought it was really odd that a person would come over for dinner because they found somebody else a job that they were paid to do. So that's my little intro about you. If you can sort of tell me a little bit about your background, sort of how you got into recruiting and what you're currently doing.
Excellent. Thank you, Adam. And after 22 years, I now find out that you thought it was odd or that I'm odd.
No, I shouldn't say odd, unique. How's that?
There you go, unique. We can go with unique.
Okay.
So my background, I have been in the recruitment business development profession for over 20 years. I got into the industry after I graduated university, working 100% commission. Back in the good old days. They still have that these days. So I have worked with corporations, consulting companies, and for half my career, I had my own company. And so my areas of expertise were information technology, finance and accounting, and then I've also done oil and gas recruitment and HR.
Right. And so just so we have a focused conversation, we're going to focus on a senior level finance position. And
Correct.
so if you can take me or walk me through, you've just been assigned to look for a senior level finance individual. How would that look from sort of start to finish, sort of a big picture without getting into the nuances, because we'll do that a little bit later.
Sure. So depending upon whether you're working for a consulting company or whether you're working for in-house with an organization, essentially you're going to meet with the client or the hiring leader. You're going to talk about the need. You're going to discuss the job description.
Oh, we lost Karen. Give us a second.
Depending upon the client, either sorry?
We lost you there.
Oh.
We lost you at job description.
Yeah, so we're gonna talk to the hiring leader in terms of like urgency, and then what our recruitment plan or strategy is going to be, how involved they want to be, if they want just me and HR to take care of it or that kind of thing. Then talking about the parameters around the interview process, the selection committee, escalation processes in case there are delays, because that never happens, particularly when you're dealing with clients or in-house. And then finally, offers, the extension of that offer, and then the onboarding and the orientation process.
Okay. Now, one of the things textbooks always talk about is processes and how you should be very detail orientated and have a specific process when you're recruiting. And unfortunately, due to resources, time, and even the candidates not wanting to give up some of their precious time through the recruiting process, what are some ideal situations that you would like, if there was no limit in the resources or time that a candidate was willing to provide, in a financial position, what would be some additional things that you would like to implement that right now is just not realistic?
Cloning of candidates. Yeah, depending upon your perspective, because when you find an A quality candidate, you want 10 more of them, and that's obviously very difficult. Resourcing in terms of budgets, resourcing in terms of accessibility to different advertising mechanisms and venues. So that would always be, and then time, because everybody wants everything now, and that's just not, that's not possible. So I think obviously resources, money, time, effort.
And a time machine.
a time machine and a cloning machine
And
to
a
get.
cloning machine.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
no ethics there. Um, So you did mention about the job posting and talking about the job description, going through it. What are your thoughts about the job ad itself? Is it good enough just to throw in the job description and say we're looking for this individual, or what's your ideas behind job postings?
I mean, I think nowadays it's really important that your company and a company's brand is front and center. Um, I think as the economy turns, and down in the States that they're seeing, maybe not so much here in Canada, but there will come a time where it will be more candidate driven, and so you need to have your company profile, its culture, its brand, its ethics, its community involvement, all of those things encapsulated into a very nice package that is included in your job description, along with this is the particular person we're looking for, this is the skill set, the background, the achievements, the educational background. All of those things have to be conveyed to try and get candidate attention, and then also motivate them to actually want to engage with your organization. So, and then depending upon whether you're, looking to be those passive candidates or those aggressive candidates, those active candidates, you're trying to encapsulate all of those. And at the same time, you want to discourage people who aren't qualified.
How do you
And
do that?
that's very specifically in your job description, so that if instead of using nice to have, it must, and it must be French, or you must have this, or those kinds of things, and very specific terminology, or very specific like a very tight job description,
Okay.
but still an appealing job description.
Right. It's the Goldilocks zone, not too sweet, not too harsh.
Yeah.
Where would you then, so you've crafted the most amazing job posting for a senior financial individual. Where would you start posting that job?
Well, obviously, we're going to go to the client's website, my website, the company website, industry user groups, associations, those kinds of things. If there's if the HRIA has a industry-specific magazine, again, when you were talking about unlimited resources, tapping into those areas. Also, it's very important to network, and so utilizing your employees, and in particular, like let's say if you've got that finance department, every time they send out an email, you're going to have your job description or a teaser attached to that email, so that we are leveraging their network also.
Right. And one of the key strengths of a recruiter is having a very strong network themselves, where they can reach out to past candidates or current candidates and asking them. One of the tips that you've given in the past is, that a candidate that you want to clone, you reach out to them and say, hey, do you have any other friends or people in your industry that you could recommend? Because usually A players know A players.
That's right. And it's basically, you're looking, I call it profiling. You're profiling a candidate. So you're trying to decide, what does this candidate like? Where do they hang out? What do they read? What do they do? And then whether you are looking for that on the traditional media, which is magazines, or whether you're doing it online, it's like, well, what group? Maybe CFOs like Harry Potter, so you're going to go to the Harry Potter group and you're going to post something there. It's whatever it takes to tap into where that group of people associates and hangs out.
Right. One of my favorite stories that you ever told was how you started recruiting Japanese language speakers for a call center. Can you just touch on that? And that really does nicely go along with sort of finding your source pool.
Yeah, so like I say, you got to try and figure out where your candidates are, what they relate to, that kind of thing. And so for myself, we were looking for about 60 call center people with various language skills, and one of these was Japanese. And so for myself, I mean, I was sending out postings to Japanese restaurants, Japanese dojos, anywhere that I thought Japanese people congregated, like to hang out, that kind of thing. And ultimately, I mean, if I ran into somebody in an elevator and I thought that they were Japanese, I would speak to them. And the one day I was at a McDonald's and there was a very nice young lady working there by the name of Mai. And I thought that she might be Japanese. And so I specifically asked her, I'm like, are you Japanese? And she's like, yes. And so I followed up with a very insightful question. I said, do you speak Japanese? And she said, yes. I'm like, bonus. And I said, and would you like to earn X amount of money? And she looked left and she looked right and she said, yes. So I gave her my card. So it's going that extra mile. It's looking for where you're going to find those people. So if it means you're going to, do some sponsorship at a fundraiser, or if you're going to go hang out at Polo Calgary, or whatever it is, where these people like to associate. And as you are networking with your existing people, and when you are networking with their referrals, you're going to start to formulate patterns and trends of where these people like to hang out, who they like to talk to, what luncheons they like to go to, et cetera, et cetera.
And as a recruiter, you are always looking out for potential candidates, even in the future. So if you don't have a position right now, if you meet a very decent, smart candidate, you want to keep in touch with them. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct, because you never know what's around the corner. And even though that particular person may not be a fit for you right now, they could be a fit for you in their future. And I have lifelong professional relationships with people that I have never placed, but have sent me ample referrals. So your recruiter may never ever place you, but you can still have a relationship with that person and you can both mutually benefit.
Right.
Because again, myself, I have contacted candidates or business people like my clients and said, look, I know you don't want to pay a fee on this, but you should call this person. Or I'll say to this person, you know what, this client's not willing to pay a fee for it, so you guys need to get together. And basically it's professional karma, and they remember that. And when there is a fee or is there a referral on the table, then they will provide you with that information.
Right. You start getting, so you've done your sourcing, you've posted your job ad, you've done your networking, and the resumes start piling in. How do you screen those resumes in order, because sometimes you can, and the biggest challenge is not so much the biggest challenge that I see right now is just the mass volume of unqualified candidates that can really mask the potential of very qualified candidates, but are missed because just of the high volume. So how do you go through your sort of screening of resume process?
Yep. So I think because there is such high volumes right now, I think to a certain degree you do have to rely on your automated screening processes, put your knockout questions in there, put your keyword searches in there. And yes, candidates can manipulate or override that because they're going to go Oracle, Oracle, Oracle 12,000 times, and so they're going to be a 95% fit. And then they're going to tell you that they worked close to the guy who did Oracle, but they never worked in Oracle.
Right.
For the most part, people are going to be honest, and so just really tightening up your knockout questions to try and get to your key. And if you seriously do need 5 years experience and they don't have 5 years experience, they're getting knocked out. For more I think higher level types of requirements, you are looking more at the manual and the human screening process, because if you're looking for a CFO, I'm not going to be getting hundreds and hundreds of candidates responding to that. And if they are, I mean, it's going to be very quick to get rid of them. And so you're looking at, on a manual screen, you're looking at the resume layout, the format, their cover letter, the structure, the spelling, the accomplishment section, all of those things. So for higher volume, I think the automated is the way to go to really minimize and get you down to those sort of top 30 candidates or top 50 if that's the case, and then basically you're going to intervene with your manual screens. And
So what you're saying is usually the higher the level the position is, the less candidates apply, and they usually deselect themselves, that you find?
I'm saying that the higher the position, so if you were to look at a triangle and we're looking for a CFO, the CFOs are going to be the top of the triangle, and there's going to be fewer of those versus if we were looking for an entry-level accountant. And so if you're looking for an entry-level accountant, you are going to need that automated process to knock out the vast majority of them if you're getting, 200 resumes or 300 resumes, because it's just far too time consuming, okay? So you want to really tighten up that job description and have your knockout questions and your keywords so that hopefully that 300 gets you down to 50, and then you can sort through that. When you're looking for a CFO, chances are, maybe you would get 50 resumes. And again, looking at those, there's going to be specific industry considerations, specific years of experience, and those kinds of things. It's going to be a much easier sort. You could still use automation, but again, there's a certain level of, I think, professionalism and professional respect that maybe comes in at a higher level that needs to be taken into consideration. At a higher level.
Right. And what I find with the more people have experience at looking at resumes, the less likely would they have a scoring or ranking system, because they know exactly within 3 to 5 seconds whether this person has the experience, because they're going straight for the role, straight for the education, and if they don't see it there, they're done. Do you have any kind of scoring system in place that you utilize, or do you usually just base it on sort of experience and you know what you're looking for?
At this stage of the game, a lot of it is experience because I do know what I'm looking for. I think sometimes, depending upon the organization, if you are working on house, they're much more structured and they are trying to be as consistent and equal as possible. So there is a much more formal process of, here is our interview selection form, here is our scoring system, here's the total, here's our comment section, and at the end of it, the selection committee and the recruitment committee will review the scores and then make our decision based on that. Whereas for smaller organizations, I think it's much more, there is a process, but it's a little bit more formal. Because at the end of the day, if you present well, you've got the experience, and let's say maybe another candidate has more experience, but you click better with the board or the current CFO, then personality and those intangible skills do go a long way, and they're much harder to measure, record, and recruit for.
Do you, in that process of pre-screening or sort of the first round, implement any kind of testing or ask the candidates to do something prior to an interview?
Yes. So I've worked at organizations where that's a standard practice. And then again, normally when times are tough, that is something that definitely comes into play because it can knock out a lot of people very quickly, especially on one of your automated testing sites. And so we have used presentations, case studies, behavioral tests, aptitude tests, those kinds of things. One organization that I worked with was just implementing more of a proprietary testing system. And after about a year, year and a half, we had enough data that the system that they had created for them actually did have a very high accuracy in terms of the candidates who scored well on these tests were more likely to get hired, were promoted faster, and did better within the organization.
Do you have any kind of favorite ones, or if somebody said to you, we'd like to implement some testing, is there ones that you would recommend for an organization sort of focusing on the financial side?
No, when on the financial side, we would do presentation and case studies, and specific to, so we gave everybody that was working in, let's say, a risk capacity or a management consulting capacity, they each got the same case study, okay, and then they all had to come in and do a different, or do their presentation. And so again, not only are you trying to put together the best presentation that you can, but you need to keep in mind that your presentation is also being compared to everybody else that's under consideration.
And
There wasn't a specific name. There wasn't a specific name for it. They were just case studies,
right.
and yeah.
No, and I'm hearing that a lot as well, that a lot of senior positions are requiring presentations, and they provide the information, and they need to provide in front of a group because it's going to be part of their responsibilities to provide financials and where the company's going and that sort of thing, and that the presentation part is quite important. When you are sort of deciding your candidates that you want to interview, how do you come about formulating the questions that you're going to ask? And do you ask all the candidates the same question, or do you customize the questions for each candidate for a specific role?
So I would say it's a bit of both. So there's definitely some standard questions in terms of, you know, your background, your education, did you graduate? Let's look at your gaps in your employment. Let's look at your successes. And then kind of based on that standard format that you're using, there is going to be deviation based on how they answer. And you need to kind of follow those deviations, because that's where you're either going to probe deeper into a specific skill set or success or achievement that they've had that is relevant to the position, or you're going to probe down that rabbit hole and you're going to find that, you know, things are maybe not adding up as they should on their resume. And so it's a bit of it's science and art combined, and so it's fact and intuition, and you're trying to marry the two of those in the process.
Do you score those interview questions at all in any way?
The deviation questions?
The sort of standard questions that you're sort of asking everyone, is there any kind of, so you formulated that question, you
Yep.
receive an answer
Yep.
for that question. Is there any scoring mechanism to that, or is it I like that question, I don't like, I kind of like that question, I don't like that question at all, or
Yes.
answer?
So more so in a corporate environment, we would be scoring those answers. Let's say if I'm working at a consulting firm and we are doing the work on behalf of an external client, if they want things, if they want a scorecard, we can provide that. Otherwise, you sort of know in your mind if it's just you, or if there's, you know, maybe one or two of you involved in the process, that between candidate A and candidate B, you know, candidate A answered much more strongly, and, you know, so in our mind we're giving that person an A plus and we're giving this person a B. And so you're all, throughout the whole process, you're always yes, no, until finally you're at your, you know, your final three or something like that.
Now, I know everyone has their favorite questions in an interview, their sort of go-to, their golden nugget, the one that really holds a lot of weight for them. Do you have
Yes.
any of those?
So, I mean, I like the one where I say I have 5 candidates exactly like you. Why should I hire you? Or I have 5 candidates that are exactly like you. Why are you so special? And, you know, and I want to see, are they taking the high road? Are they taking the low road? How are they comparing themselves? How are they promoting themselves? How are they, you know, maybe putting the competition down, just to see what their thought process is.
Do you recall sort of one of your favorite answers that you received on that question?
Well, normally you get, you know, it does kind of put people on the spot, because there's definitely people who are going to toot their own horn, and they're going to make sure that in their mind, who's ever competing with them is not very good. And you know what? The only funny story I have on that one, it wasn't even at the interview, it was at the reference stage. So we got our candidate and we were doing the reference, and it was like the reference was in competition with our candidate. And so he would sort of build him up, but then knock him down in compared to himself. So that was really interesting. So
Yes, I'm hearing self-awareness is very important in an interview, and apparently being a reference as well.
yes, exactly.
So you're going through interviews, you're going through your questions. Depending if it's a corporate environment, you might be scoring them. If it's more of a non-corporate area, smaller business, you just might be going through a sort of I like that answer, I don't like that answer. What are some signs during the interview that this is a good candidate and the interview is going well, that's sort of giving you a positive feeling through the interview process?
Yeah, so I think there's a number of maybe nonverbals in terms of body language, eye contact, handshake, confidence, communication and articulation, a consistency throughout the interview in terms of, you know, what they're saying and is it matching up with their resume, positive or verifiable gap analysis in terms of, you know, there's a 3-month gap here, what was taking place, or, you know, what happened there. So just that confidence, that whole package of, you know, what initially attracted you to that person that was on paper is now a 3D representation of what they said they were, and the two are matching up.
Okay. Any sort of red flags for you, so that you are in the interview and all of a sudden it's like in your head you're having sort of these danger bells going off that you should cut this interview short, or do you even cut interview shorts, even if, so let's start with that one. If you're getting red flags from a candidate, do you cut the interview short or do you finish the interview? And then what are some of those bells that ring for you during the interview process?
Yeah. So have I cut interviews short? Yes. And then again, depending upon whether I'm working on behalf of a client or whether in a corporate environment, because sometimes within a corporate environment, they want to follow that interview process to the letter, ask every question so that the evaluation has been consistent with everybody. Other times I've been in interviews where I know that this is an absolute no, and I'm sort of you know, looking for cues from my hiring lead if they're in the room to see if that they're in agreement, so that we both know that we're going to be cutting this short. And then usually, because you think you're bringing in your top 3 candidates, you're not necessarily having a conversation of, wow, that guy was a dud. You know, so in the future, you are having conversations in terms of, this is what we're going to do if this situation comes up in the future. So yes, I've cut them short. Other instances, we do go through the whole process. Signs that you're looking for is, and it's interesting because I'm going to say like poor eye contact. But having said that, I did hire a guy and he was phenomenal and he looked at the floor the whole time. So you have to kind of take all your red flags and all your good cues into consideration and kind of put them on the scales of justice, if you will. But, you know, if somebody's nervous, if they're hesitant, if they're having difficulty explaining what they did, or one of the questions you asked is what questions do I really like to ask somebody? A lot of times you can encounter people who say, well, we did this, we did that, we did the other, and they're talking about the team. And I get that we all work in a team environment, but we're individuals. And so if somebody keeps answering the questions, we, then I will interject. I want to know what you did. So I want to hear some I statements. And if they can't bridge that gap between we and I, and what we accomplished and what I accomplished and what my contribution was to that success of that team, again, that's a bit of a, it gets a little murky in that area.
Absolutely. And ultimately, like you said, you had 5 good candidates, and maybe a client or a person wants just to see one or the best pick. How do you make that decision? How do you decide who you present to a potential client?
Mm-hmm. So hopefully you have a very good understanding of your client and what they want and what personality and what their corporate culture is. And you also understand your candidate and what they're looking for and what their hot buttons are. By the time you, in an ideal world, by the time you present the candidate and the client, you as the recruiter should know that it's going to be a yes. And if you don't, then you should be nervous and you should be asking yourself, why don't I know if he's accepting or she is accepting? And then you better answer or ask some more questions to get to that point. Right. And then if you don't have those questions, then basically you're going to spin the dice, and that 60-day recruitment cycle that you just participated in could just...
So this is what I hear often. So especially with senior positions, it can take months in order to present or find a candidate from the moment that you post a position to where you're ready to present. What's the longest you've ever had to look for a position or at that senior sort of finance level?
A year.
A year. And how did that go at the end? Did you find somebody?
Yeah. But it's a lot of work, and so you don't want to get to the end and not know what the hiring leader and or your external client is thinking and feeling about this candidate, and nor do you want to be surprised by the candidate in terms of, oh well, I don't want to relocate, or we're $10,000 on our salary, or gee, I didn't realize you didn't offer, Portuguese as a second language school in Calgary, or whatever the case may be.
Right. So the person's been hired. You've presented the person. They were interviewed by the client. The client's happy. What kind of orientations do you recommend that clients sort of go through in order to make sure that the candidate feels welcome and wants to stay once they've been selected?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it sounds pretty basic, but I mean, how many people have started their first day and they get there and their computer's not set up and their phone's not set up or their desk, and so really you're sort of, sitting there kind of twiddling your thumb. So the basics are, having those things set up. Or somebody who will actually help them and has the time and who cares, because sometimes people are assigned buddies who aren't. So then what's the point? And then I think it's important to have a schedule of follow-up and say, how was your first week? How was your first month? Second month, third month. And not only is the person who hired them interacting and seeing how things are going, but you need to have like almost a third party neutral person, so that candidate, if they are struggling or things aren't going or they need a sounding board, can be like, this is an issue or this is a concern, and help with, oh, well, I'm at a lack of an example right now, but that person can intervene and say, oh, we can get that taken care of, or, oh yeah, no problem, we weren't aware of that, let's do that, versus, that person may not want to go directly to their manager because it may not necessarily be, maybe they were supposed to get a gym membership or a parking stall and that they haven't, and they don't want to go to their manager and be like, I'm whining about this, or whatever the case may be. So I think having those sort of checks and balances is where people are checking in with them, providing the necessary equipment and tools, knowing where they can get help and support, whether it's from HR, whether it's for any other thing other than their manager, I think is a good sounding practice.
No, the buddy system I highly recommend as well. That way it takes the accountability and ownership away from the manager. And some people, you just got to be really careful who the buddy is and that they want to be the buddy.
A buddy.
Otherwise, if somebody's forced to be a buddy, it never works out well.
Nope.
One of the cons to being a phenomenal recruiter is that recruiting comes and goes with the booms. When everything's hot, you are in hot demand, and you can ask for a really good finder's fee because you just can't find any candidates. But when the recession goes down, training and hiring is one of the first things to go. How do you navigate that, or how can you prepare for the busts and the booms as a recruiter?
As a recruiter, I mean, I think it's good. Well, it comes down to, I think, having a good reputation and having a very strong work ethic. And when times are good, just like any household or, a responsible business, you live on a certain amount, but you allocate money for the future so that you can ride out, when you're not making 5 placements a month and you're making 1 placement a month. And so I think it's having that and, recognizing the environment. And if you've been in this environment a long time, you know that when the sun is shining, you make hay, and when the sun's not shining, then, you pray for sunshine.
Right.
And it's budgeting and allocating appropriately, and then maybe trying to change up the mix a little bit. So maybe before you were focused on just doing consulting, maybe you want to try and do some full-time, or vice versa. Or maybe you decide you want to diversify into another industry. I think sometimes people that are the hardest hit in the recruitment are the ones who are potentially in-house and working in a specific area, versus if you are working at a consulting company, maybe manufacturing is doing well. Whereas right now, I mean, if you're, cannabis is going to be legal, and there's all kinds of opportunities that are taking place in that growth industry. How many times have we heard that pun?
Yeah.
Sorry. So it's being flexible, and it's trying to, roll with the times.
Right. Are there any tools or technologies that you use to help you in your recruiting process?
For myself, I mean, I have an ATS. I've worked with ATSs in the past, and then it's network. And maybe that makes me old school, because I find that, and we talked a little earlier before we started recording, that there is a much more reliance on video and technology, and that may be a good thing, and that also may be a detriment to the whole networking and relationship building process that I think is really important in recruitment, whether times are good or times are bad.
Absolutely. It's you hear it in sales, the same thing. It's about relationship building, and people usually don't say yes on the first time. They'll say yes after the 8th or 12th time.
Yep.
And if you give up after the first time, chances are you'll never sell anything. And it's about relationship building.
Yep.
More than anything, specifically in recruitment, and making sure you have a warm, and a lot other point that people miss on networking is you got to keep it warm. So you need to go to these events. You need to go out and be there. If you met somebody 5 years ago and you say, I know that person, you don't know that person because they don't remember you, and you're sort of reaching out to a stranger again. And I know that you really do focus on keeping your network warm and being active in the organization. What do you think about resume databases as a recruiter? Do you feel that most recruiters utilize those databases, or do they always sort of start from scratch and start actively looking, or do they go back to those databases of candidates that have been in there 5-10 years?
Mm-hmm. I don't know what the vast majority of recruiters are doing. I know for myself, my database is sort of the kickoff point so that I can start, getting the word out, getting the tentacles out, stoking the fire of that opportunity so that people are talking about it at the dinner table with their friends when they invite the recruiter over for dinner and their kids are there, or they're at the barbecue or at their hockey tournament or whatever it is. And so, yeah, I think the database is a good place to start. And then you just build upon that, and that's your postings and then your user groups and, just everything that's going to come into attracting that profile and that candidate that you're looking for.
Perfect. And we touched already on this, and you did mention that you're, we're both seeing a little bit more of the cover letter, YouTube videos, and the recruiters doing video job postings describing what candidate they're looking for. Are you seeing any other kind of trends, positive or negative, in recruitment?
So I would just say that I think that it seems like there is a reliance on the technology to send a lot of, is it in-mail? Is that what we're calling it? Versus, just picking up the phone and talking to somebody. Like when I go onto my LinkedIn account, I have hundreds of emails from people. Nobody, and my phone number is posted, and nobody's ever called me. And I find that really odd.
No,
because it's called human resources. It's recruitment. I think there should be some human in that resource.
Yeah, and even pre-screening telephone calls are very rare. It's usually a link to a questionnaire and say, please complete these questions. So
Right.
I'm getting a sense that you're anti sending out a questionnaire and you're pro picking up the phone and talking to that candidate.
I am pro-relationship, absolutely. I think that there is a place for technology, but I don't think it's the only place.
And so this kind of goes into the sort of last question. Is there anything that we've talked about or that we haven't talked about that you feel is very important for people and students to know about what makes a good recruitment selection process or makes a good recruiter? I think you stating that building relationships, putting in that human element, picking up the phone, meeting people, networking, going to events, talking to people, what positions you're looking for, if they know anyone out there, are all tips that you've sort of given through the interview process. Is there anything else that you would like to add that you could pass on the advice to future recruiters that you just know this works due just to experience?
Sure. I think that, again, with the advent of technology, which is a good thing, I think that some of the feedback that I'm getting from candidates is the lack of candidate experience and candidate care. And I realize that it's very high volumes right now, and and maybe from a recruiter perspective, nobody likes delivering bad news that somebody wasn't selected, but that recruitment process it goes from the start to the finish. So even though you don't hire somebody or they weren't a right fit from you, if you handle that rejection portion of the process well, again, you can still get a wealth of information and contribution from that candidate who was not selected, because you want every candidate leaving your organization in which you are the ambassador, walking away going, wow, what a great experience, what a great organization. I didn't make it this time, but I would love to work there, and I would absolutely recommend anybody go through that process with them.
And just as you were talking, a question popped into my head because you are a individual who, throughout your career, has had a dual role of running your own business on the side, or full time, sometimes
Yep.
part time, shutting it down, and then building it back again. Can you just walk me through your thinking uh, on that, and then what do you think future employers think about you having your own business, and also then applying to a position?
That's a hard one to judge, and I think it depends on the audience and who's receiving you. So sometimes with, if I'm applying to organizations that are smaller and more entrepreneurial, they absolutely value that experience and want to embrace that within the organization. Maybe larger organizations structured and are more process oriented, maybe don't appreciate the entrepreneurial aspects of that approach so much. That
Okay.
makes,
Yeah, it does. I really do think it's who the audience is because,
yeah.
you get a mixture of all. You're just going to leave me as soon as the market picks up. You're just looking to for some kind of part-time job, whereas other, especially startups, we need people that know how to run their own business because we're running our own business, and you have to be held accountable for that. So I'd like to thank you for spending 45 minutes with us. And like I said at the beginning, a wealth of information. Is there anything that you'd like to plug or let people know about before we say our goodbyes?
No, I think that was great. Thank you so much.
Awesome. So we're just going to go into our credits. Don't go away.
All right.
And thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for watching the interview. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and click on notifications so you don't miss the next one.